Now jumping into politics, in Rivers State, the countdown has begun to the end of 6 months of emergency rule imposed by President Bola Tinubu. With just 4 days left before it expires, preparations are now underway to return to a democratic governance. As part of the transition, an interdenominational Thanksgiving service has been scheduled for Sunday, September 14th. In a statement signed by the Secretary of the State Government, Professor Ibibia Warika, invitations were extended to council chairmen, security and parliamentary chiefs, traditional rulers, members of boards and governing councils, captains of industries, and top government officials. The Rivers State Administrator is expected to attend as a special guest of honor. Now, to discuss this, we are joined by a legal practitioner, Towo Oseruoja. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, very thank you, sir. How would you assess the governance performance during the emergency period? Has this improved or worsened the political and security situation?
There's nothing to assess there. For me, there's nothing to assess. And if you've looked at events that has occurred during the state of emergency, you can't build something or nothing and expect it to stand.
Right.
And you could see that the provision of the Constitution has been breached. You look at Section 1 of the Constitution, the supremacy of the Constitution. And if you look at Section 14, which is the fundamental principle of governance that states that the sovereignty of Nigeria belongs to the people, that has been infringed. You also look at the provision of that Section 14 that also talks about that the principle of governance of every state in Nigeria must be in line with the provision of the Constitution. That has been in democratic system, that has also been breached. You look at the provision of Section 178 of the Constitution that talks about the tenures of governor, and if you look at the provision of Section 116 that talks about members of the State House of Assembly, all those provisions of the Constitution has been breached. So what we should be looking at, or if we want to rate them, we'll look at the level of the illegality that has happened in Rivers State and the aftermath therein. There have been no project. If you look at it, the local government election that was conducted was an affront of the decision of the Supreme Court. The reason the Supreme Court flouted the election conducted by the governor, by the Fubara then led government, was also what happened in Rivers State. So if you ask us, or if you ask those of us who are democratically conscious to rate the performance of the administration, is obviously telling us to score or legalizing illegality in Rivers State or in Nigeria.
Right. Now, taking into consideration what you said, we are quite aware that there is political, there's security, and then there's administration. Now, in your own opinion, do you believe this imposition was primary for political, security, or administrative reasons?
Well, I'll look at it from the aspect of political.
Right.
Because if you look at issue of security or administrative reason, you ask yourself, is Rivers State the most security alert state in Nigeria? The answer is no. There are several states, if you look at it basically and holistically, that would have warranted such an action, not for a democratically elected institution of government or governments be removed, but for the purpose of containing such circumstances. I'll give you a good example. That provision which the president, I respect the office of the president, but that does not mean we should accept stupidity as an act of leadership or a level of turning the provision of the Constitution. The office of the president will respect that office very well, and I also respect the office. The provision of Section 305, which some of us have been saying, is not to remove. I will say it again, it's not to remove. Obasanjo made that mistake and it was corrected. Goodluck Jonathan also invoked that particular provision, and the governors of those states were maintained. It's just for we to look at issues that are affecting a particular unit of the Nigeria component. And what should that be when they say state of emergency is declared? Is bringing all force in place into being. So it's not for purpose of security. It's basically for purpose of political, jeopardizing the provision of the constitution and giving the trust of the people or the sovereignty of the people to an individual. That is wrong.
Now, Mr.
That's
Osarwaja,
absolutely wrong.
let me just interject very quickly because I want to loop in my next question because it looks like you might be heading in that direction. Now, of course, when we are looking at governance, there's always a bit of a SWOT analysis that takes place. So in your own opinion, what are some of the risks and opportunities as the state transitions back to democratic governance?
Oh, the risks and the risks, there is no opportunity there, but there are a very level of risks there. Because I know, as a matter of fact, there are several things that this event that happened in Rivers State that has played out.
Right.
One, we discovered that there's nothing like political parties, because if there are political parties, PDP as a political party would have taken it headlong to
Right.
see that that thing never exceed more than 2 months, looking at the legal process that would have taken. Then you also look at party alienation. If there are political parties with ideology, you will see that the National House of Assembly would have consented to the action of the president without a dissenting voice. That was never happened. Then if you look at the risks now, you now look at what is the implication. One, there will be an issue if the governor decide to question his durability, that is his tenure, his accurate tenure. The accurate tenure will be the provision of the constitution say 4 years. The provision of the constitution that every governor will be elected and rule for the tenure for the period of 4 years. So now, if the governor decide to go and question that 6 months of suspension, will it be counted among his among his tenure? That will be an issue. So obviously, Rivers State may likely, if the court decide to interpret that provision or interpret his issue, Rivers State may likely drift into out-cycle election by INEC. That is one. Then the other issue we'll be looking at again is the issue of whether actions taken by the sole administrator per se are legal. Because if it does not have the constitutional backing to occupy that position, every action taken amount to illegality and will not stand. That is another issue. Then the third issue again is that which to some of us social political analysts will say, will Rivers State be part of other component of Nigeria that will be celebrating Democracy Day in June 12, which is basically May 29? That will be another question again, because if you look at the statement accredited by the secretary to the alleged secretary to the state government of Rivers State, he said turning that's transition into democratically government. So obviously within that 6 months, Rivers State has been taken away from that democratic chain into a sole administratorship chain, which can be linking to the dark days of the military era. So there are several issues that need to be questioned. Where is left for Fubara, is left for the legal team, is left for the people of Rivers State to address those issues.
Right. Before I let you go, I want us to take a look at stakeholders. And I think I want to hear from you. When we're looking at stakeholders, especially the political actors and civil society, what should stakeholders prioritize in the coming weeks to avoid the relapse into instability?
What will happen is basically two things will happen there.
Right.
We know the stakeholders there is Wike, the former governor of Rivers State, and also the FCT minister. Then we see the like of Fubara. It's two things that will happen there too when you talk about the stakeholder. Obviously, other stakeholders has failed, and the stakeholders we are talking about when it comes to the issue of Rivers State, we'll talk about one, the Constitution, the Supreme Court has held that the office belongs to the political party. So PDP as a party cannot be linked as a stakeholder, because whatever step that will be taken moving forward will determine whether Fubara will succumb to the wills and caprices of Wike as a person, or whatever he would have said, because it's between Wike and Fubara. Then the issue that will now come is to see that whether the sovereignty of the people will take place, because Fubara as a person, which I believe as any human, is already subjective, it is already subjected. And if nobody, since people could not really come to his aid, the institutions that ought to have come to his aid did not come to his aid. So the two stakeholders there will be either Fubara and Wike. So one must submit to one. And whether the desire of one that will be submitted to override the interests of the people or not is something we should be looking at too.
Mr. Oseroja, one must submit to one. Thank you so much. I'll let you go on that remark. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.